like a more detailed explanation of when we're gonna borrow and how we're paying back. Any questions? Does this go to, this was put in from the mayor's office. So any questions for the mayor on that?
Yeah, I didn't get any backup on this brand new one.
Well, we didn't, we talked about at the last meeting that we approved 3.2, we just revised the language to approve amending. My understanding from the meeting was that everyone didn't feel they had enough time to evaluate. I know Rick's with us tonight, so the questions related to our schedule of borrowing and what we need to do to get through the fiscal year, or just.
Yeah, I'd like to just suggest that this is $9 million. Do we know how much we owe, or how much our deficit is that we are going to have to try and figure out a way to pay off? It used to be $5 million. Is that still the figure? I know you mentioned $8 million at one point, not too distant.
Look at the number less.
I believe it was around $6 million, but the cash flow is the problem. And the cash flow, because money is coming in later, we could need up to $8 million in cash flow. It's not that we will have a deficit of $8 million at the end of the year, it's the cash, the flow of the cash.
Let me continue then. So we're talking about somewhere along the line, we have managed, corporately have managed to spend $6 million more than we had, and now we're short another $9 million. Is there a point at which we decide that we are finally going to address the concept of increasing revenues instead of increasing our debt? Is that in the plan anywhere?
Well, I think it's very clear that based on the state, we don't have the opportunity to continue increasing our debt. That's just not an option.
But that's what we're doing.
No, we're not.
Oh,
We're dealing with cash flow because money's not coming in at the same time as it's going out. So by dealing with the deficit in the balance of the deficit plan, we'll be spending less than we're taking in revenues to pay off that deficit.
fact of the matter is that we're talking about $9 million additional dollars that will not be available after November, because we're going to have to pay back that money.
Right, but that's not revenue, we're not putting revenue into the line to do that. So we're gonna be chasing around next year when we're spending $2 million, $3 million, whatever that number is, less than we're taking in revenues, we're paying off some of the deficit, our cash flow begins to equal, we're gonna need still to borrow cash, we're not gonna need to borrow as much cash, because we're paying back some of that deficit and starting to catch up. So from answering your earlier question, whether we pursue revenue stream to come in or something to that effect to address it that way, I think is trying to figure out where we are at this point to make that determination, is if we can get out of the deficit minus any increased burden on the taxpayers.
So you would have essentially forgotten about or decided not to pursue a tax increase.
At this juncture, we've had so many things that needed to be looked at and made sure that they were being properly addressed through the budget that we've got, which we think are the solid 13, 14 numbers, even from what we proposed or gave to council on the first. And now we're trying to also put those in for 15 and 16 so that we have to address those simultaneously, the budget and the deficit plan, so as we go through. So once we finish those numbers tomorrow morning, we plan to have to council tomorrow to take home with you at the meeting, the detail behind the budget that was given to you and showing the changes since you had the white, which was provided to you on April 1st last.
Yeah,
April
thank
2nd,
you.
I believe, because of the timing.
Thank you.
Okay.
First.
And and to be clear, I wanna just make sure I understand this, because it seems to me that when, that Dean was here, this has been going on. It just wasn't transparent before because it didn't need to be, is that correct? I mean, there were borrowings, in other words, we were using money that was in a pool of money, and we were taking care of business, paying regular bills, paying out salaries, but there was more money there.
None of which any of us, I believe, at least in this room at this point in time, were involved in. I believe he said 2004 or 5, and that was the Island Lakes deal, when the property was sold. I believe, again, he, remember him saying we received a check on June 30th, and it had to be driven to the bank, directly to the bank and deposited, because that would have been the difference between us being in deficit at the end of the fiscal year versus not. It was a one-time revenue source that came in that made the city, flush at that point in time. If you're anticipating that revenue coming in and you don't have it, then you're borrowing from something else, clearly. So, yeah, I mean, those were the points in time, as I said, 13 years you're running deficit spending, because you're spending more than you're actually taking in revenue. You've got to get that money from somewhere.
Okay.
Is that